Hey Aaron, love your videos. I thought you'd get a kick out of this. Maybe you could offer me some advice. This is the machine I've got at work. We rarely do any aluminum welding. We rarely do any TIG welding, but I've been tasked with welding 3/8, just a butt weld with this welder. I'm guessing this is just an old transformer welder. There's no adjustments for anything at all. It says under AC that you get 150 amps. And I'm trying to weld up this 3/8, just do a butt weld. It doesn't need to be super structural or anything, but this is what I'm getting. That is the best that I've been able to do. I've ground that out. I've tried different rod. This is 5083 that I think I'm trying to use, and 4043 I've got that also, but it's just really small. My only next thing I'm going to try is try and preheat this a lot and see if I can't get some more heat into it, but I don't know. Thought I'd ask you for some help on this archaic welder. Thanks, buddy. Keep up the good work.
Hi Bill, thanks for the good video idea. So in this video I'm going to weld this 3/8 up with only 135 amps to make it even harder, and then bend test it to the point of failure. Okay, first off I'm going to get my welder set up exactly how yours is limited to. How you said you have no adjustments. So you have no electrode negative and positive amperage independence, right? So those are the same. Your balance, I'm guessing, would be at 75, but I'm going to go even worst case scenario to make this even harder for me. We'll go 65, and then the frequency is going to be just 60 hertz. And then, like you said, with your machine, it's showing on your chart you can only get 150 amps. And then yours is 20% duty cycle, which is going to be a pain for you. You know, generally, there's different ways that manufacturers explain this, but essentially it's you only have 2 minutes out of 10 minutes that machine will weld at full amperage before it overheats and wants to cool down. So you pretty much have 2 minutes to get this done. Because if it overheats, then you're going to have to wait 8 more minutes, then your machine's going to have to cool down and then try again. And his machine's using a sine wave, I'm assuming, not a square wave. So I got my Dynasty set like that. And then this is 50% wave balance. And I'm going to just show you the difference when you crank it up. I'll put it up to 65. See how you get a wider time down low, heat into the part versus the cleaning action side. This is running it all the way up to 90. Kind of cool to see that on the screen, huh? Versus a square wave. See how you have more actual time where it's putting heat in the part instead of a wave. It gets down, stays on, comes back up each cycle. Hopefully that makes sense. So immediately there were 2 things I noticed that you were doing wrong, or you just didn't know. So you have the parts clamped down to a metal plate and you're trying to preheat them. So you can get this all nice and hot, right? But then as soon as you go grab your TIG to start welding, all that heat is going to suck down into whatever metal it's touching. So you want to shim these up off of, you can clamp them over here, like you figure out how to do that. I'll show you in a minute to clamp those up and get you a good air gap. And steel's not as bad. Like, it would be even worse if you had it on aluminum, because aluminum has higher thermal conductivity. If you heated it up here, then this aluminum is going to transfer all that heat away from you. And then the next thing I noticed is, let me get in here closer. Your parts, you beveled them. So this is what I got going right now, just 2 really sharp 90-degree butts. It looks like you kind of did a little bit of a round over and then it was flat face down like this. So you're probably getting like that much penetration, right? Like you said, yours is non-structural, but that's open to interpretation. Everything's structural to a certain point. But anyways, so what you would want to do with your little machine is, there's several options the way you choose to bevel, but you could do this. Oops. So this is really thin, you know, this essentially this is 1/8 inch or thinner. So that your machine will weld that just fine. And then the part's hotter. So you need less amperage on your next welds, you know, however you want to do this. I'm not really being precise here, but then flip it over and do this. But like I said, though, the problem that you're going to run into is the 20% duty cycle. So your torch, I really do think that your oxyacetylene torch is going to be a key in getting this done for you. Get it up off the table and preheat it. Or like you said, if it's non-structural, just, you know, save you time and just do a little bevel on each side and put a weld on each side. That might be good enough for you. And for all you guys watching that don't know much about aluminum welding, I would never get anything under 225 amps if you're planning on welding any aluminum. It'll just limit you and you'll regret it. And if you're planning on doing this professionally, where you're running a lot of welds, regardless of any thickness, you're going to want a 300 amp plus welder and a water-cooled torch, I think. Like you said, you guys don't do hardly any TIG welding at all, so your boss may not be able to justify buying this stuff, like the router table or a bigger TIG welder, but that's how I'd do it. You're probably just grinding out the flap wheel. So I've got it clamped on an 1/8 inch sheet on each side, 1/8 inch air gap, and then just this little wedge, you know, because my table's not perfectly flat, just trying to get it, you know, somewhat flat. So this is the very thinnest point, the least amperage required to get a weld going. So, you know, tack it good and strong here on each side. And I'll back this down to 145 just to make it even more like, you know, worst case scenario. I'll try tacking this without any preheat, just cold, see how it goes. Okay, that went real easy. Good strong tack on there. Do the same over on the back side. First off, I'm going to try to weld it cold at 145 amps and see how it goes.
Kind of rocking back and forth a little bit, getting up on the top edges.
So that actually worked out a little better than I thought. See where it cooled though, it's getting that big crack right in the middle. It's all frosty back here. So it obviously wasn't penetrating down into the root very good, but I was just kind of doing horseshoes like this. Come over here, dip the rod, wet it back into both sides. So let's unclamp this and see how strong that is. Analyze it a little bit. Like I said earlier, you know, with the 20% duty cycle, you probably wouldn't be able to do this whole thing in one pass. It probably would. The machine probably would have overheated and shut down about here is what my guess would be. See, no penetration through the root at all. But like he said, non-structural, so I can't. I'm torquing on that as hard as I can. It's bending a little bit, but I can't get it to go further than that. And unfortunately, in the vise, it's kind of hard to explain how much, you know, torque this takes to break. So that came over and broke off pretty easy, not too much pressure. But Bill didn't really explain to me what this was exactly for. So this way is the easiest way to break it. If you were gonna pull this way, it would have taken like, I don't know, 3 to 5 times as much pressure or tensile load. It may have been okay, but let's look at it. So it didn't even penetrate in all the way to the face of that bevel, not quite. Okay, bevel it back out and preheat it. I'm just going to use this little propane bottle and then this little torch I got off Amazon. I'll leave a link below. Okay, so that surface is really hot now, so put that down to TIG weld on. Get after it as quick as you can. Okay, I don't know how long that took, maybe a minute. So with your duty cycle, you might want to hurry up and flip your part over. I probably should have gapped this a little bit more. You can see in there, there's zero burn through, zero full penetration, but I'm gonna hit it from this side. We'll cut it apart later and analyze it. Okay, obviously not ideal, it's frosty, but... So you can see how that weld's a little bit concave with the light shining under it. But when you're doing this, if you're doing 3/8 thick with that small of a welder, you don't want to try to hump it up and fill it all in one pass, because it's going to cold lap over and you can't move forward and visually see it penetrating into the root and then move forward again. If your welder allows it without overheat, you'd want to come back in and do like a little weave bead or 2 stringers, whatever you prefer, to cap it off, to make it thicker than barely thicker than the base metal. In this scenario, I would just do like a really small weave bead and not 2 stringers. Just one little weave bead to barely cap this back off. But I don't want to do that because I want to cut this apart first and show you guys how well it fused in. Not my finest work here, but you can see how at the very first it's pretty shiny, and then here it gets a little bit frosty and hazy looking. That's a good sign of not quite enough amperage, but we're only working with 145 amps here, so you can only do so much. Then you can see this part warped a little bit this way. If you were mass producing parts, you would figure this out through trial and error, how far to like preload your parts, or put a certain amount of fill rod in one side, then it pulls that way, then flip it and then put a little bit more on the other side so it pulls back straight. But for something like this, I'm just gonna shim it up and give it a few whacks and straighten it back out. Good enough for demonstration purposes. You can see I was a little bit offset when I set it up to weld it, but it's not what this video is really about. Side's a little bit high. There we go. pretty straight. So another thing to point out, if you're like way off on your angle and it distorts a lot, and you try to whack it back into shape, that's going to compromise the strength of the weld joint because it's going to stretch your weld out. But, you know, just a little bit's not too big of a deal like that. Okay, after we cut and polish, you can see these two little spots right here, right there, and then the flat between it, so it didn't fuse right there. Okay, let's bend it. So I really do think with 145 amps, you can weld 3/8 and do a perfect job. You know, just cut it a little bit sharper, gap it out of here, and preheat it really good. We'll see how this does though. So fairly strong. It started deforming down here first before that fractured. So this is the exact same thing you'd expect after seeing that polish test. That center section wasn't fused at all. So with the concaves taken into account and the lack of fusion in the middle, that's what, maybe like 40 to 50, 55% of the thickness of this. So that's, you know, that's how strong it's going to be. Pretty strong though, you know, like for what he's doing. You know, he said non-structural. Like I'm yanking on it pretty dang hard here. So if you had a tensile load, that would be really strong, but you know, you start doing this and fatiguing it, it's gonna fail. Okay, this time I got them sharpened all the way to the point, and then a 50 thousandths gap at least in between them. And then preheat them, same routine. I'm gonna tack weld both ends at 145 amps, cold first. Then slowly ramp the amperage off so it doesn't cool too fast and crack. And this isn't 50 thou the whole way down. You can see I just hand grounded. It's a little bit bigger gap down here, but whatever. For these last welds, I'm going to run it down even lower. I'm going to go 135. Just even more worst case scenario. Okay, see you in about 5 more minutes. Okay, 135 amps. Let's see how it goes. Okay, we'll call that good. Ran out of room hitting the clamp over here. Still not ideal. You know, it's kind of frosty looking, but I think it's burning in pretty good. Let's flip it over. Get it while it's hot. So the problem I'm having is it's kind of cooling down a little bit, and I'm trying to get this messed up looking tungsten down in there as close as possible to get it penetrating through. You know, with his welder settings, you can't keep a good shape on your tungsten trying to max it out like this. So I'm down in there really, really close trying to fuse it in, and I'm touching off every now and then, but that's my excuse. A little bit of a shit show on this side, but okay. So the problem here is Bill's machine is probably maxed out on duty cycle and it's wanting to shut down because it's overheating. So what he would have to do is heat this all up again and then come back in, but I'm just going to keep going at it. Still at 135 amps. Just out of curiosity, on this one I'm going to try to, while it's still hot, I'm going to try to use 1/8 inch filler rod and do it without weaving. I'm not the best at weave beads, I've never cared to do them. Still barely concave. I wouldn't feel comfortable stuffing that much filler rod in 2 passes. I think it, you know, for 3/8, I would use 3 passes. Okay, one more while it's hot. Okay, success on that one. Cracked away from the weld. No stress cracks or anything around it. Barely concave on that weave bead, but you can see the other side's humped up a little bit thicker, so. Okay, that was 135 amps, so you can get it done. You just gotta be real patient with the preheat, with the torch, and get it up off the table. And another thing you can do is use a helium blend in your gas. Like I've got a big bottle, it's called A25, which is 75% argon and 25% helium. That'll make for me, my experience, you don't get quite as shiny and pretty looking welds, but it acts like maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10% more amperage. It lets you get a little more heat down into the part. With your little welder though, you're still gonna have to preheat it. And then another thing worth noting is that this isn't T6 anymore. After getting it that hot, you know, it's going to be just 60, 61 like T0. So, thanks for watching.